Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief of pharmaphorum. I'm here at LSX Boston, and I'm joined by Steffen Sebastian-Bolz, Dr. Steffen Sebastian-Bolz. Are you CEO at Aphaia?
CFO.
CFO at Aphaia Health, was working on obesity medication beyond GLP-1 space.
That's correct.
We met actually at this very conference center at Bio, so it's good to see you again.
Likewise.
And I'm excited to hear more about what you've been up to. But maybe a quick summary of Aphaia and sort of what your guys' work and how it fits into the larger obesity research field right now.
Yeah, so Aphaia tries to do something very different as compared to what's happening in the field. And Aphaia started as a company that started to think about how we could treat type 2 diabetes. And the punchline we had when we did our fundraising was that we're going to treat diabetes with sugar. Which was attractive enough to raise enough money to try it. And so what we did then is we composed our first trial, and when we tried to understand how we could build this trial, we wanted to see whether our formulation, which is actually a formulation which encapsulates glucose to transport it to very defined parts of the small intestine to stimulate cells there. We can get into more detail if you want later. But when we put this trial together, we thought about what we wanted to do and wanted to see whether it affects type 2 diabetes, NAFLD, NASH, metabolic syndrome. I mean, we would try to be very ambitious. And so when we thought about, well, what could be the umbrella disease for this, or the umbrella pathology, we thought, it could be obesity. And when we did this, it was 2019. Nobody talked about obesity, neither did we. So we just used it. And all of a sudden, we were in the middle of the storm. We were an obesity company. And now we are an obesity company. We have something to offer because our formulation also induces weight loss as well, together with many other things. Yeah.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit about what makes Aphaia's science different and special, the approach you're taking.
The approach we're taking is to use the body. So when you think about GLP-1 agonists as a medication, or tirzepatide, which has GIP in it, or all the different drugs which are being made right now, they are just emulate or simulate the action of 1 or 2 or 3 hormones. And we came from a different perspective. We thought, well, you and I, we just carry all those hormones with us. We produce those hormones. The problem is that when you get obese or when you have a metabolic disease, that the accessibility to the cells which produce those hormones is limited. And this has to do with the fact that food, which actually stimulates those cells down in the deep part of the small intestine, the transport of food is very slow, and that food in a composition that our GI tract was never optimized for. We eat far too much proteins, far too much fat. It just obstructs the passage. And so we need to find something that bypasses this bolus sitting in the upper small intestine to reach those cells very reliably. So our ambition was that when you eat it, or when you take it, when you ingest this formulation, when I do it, that it reaches the same part in your GI tract, in my GI tract, which is very different, which is supposedly different, at the same time. And that's the same thing. And that is what we've spent 4 years on to optimize it. And it works. So we can actually show in our phase 1 trials now that we can very reliably induce the release of hormones like GLP-1, GLP-2, auxin-2 modulin, glycine, PYY, similarly in all patients. So you and me, it would work similarly. And that is now the basis for what we do. We use our glucose formulation, to elaborate a little bit more on this, we take glucose, real glucose, sugar, and we encapsulate it with a polymer coating. And the polymer coating is the optimized and also patent protected part, which actually takes care of protecting the glucose when it's on its passage through the stomach, which has a very low pH, it's very acidic, and then through the upper part of the small intestine, and very reliably opens up and releases the cargo at a very defined part of the small intestine, and rains the glucose down on all those cells there, which then start to release those hormones. And so the claim that we had is, why should we just work with 1 or 2 or 3 hormones if we can have them all?
Right.
And that's what we have now documented, what we have shown. We've also shown that now in our trials with the disease population, with obese patients who also have type 2 diabetes beside obesity and or metabolic syndrome and or what did I forget? NAFLD or NASH. they react to it. They produce those or release those hormones similarly, and it doesn't matter whether they are pre-diabetics, diabetics, or healthy obese population. They all react similarly to our stimulation, and that's what we're very happy about, because that's the foundation for a clinical effect that we have now, that we're measuring right now as we speak, in a phase 2 study, in which we hopefully will be able to publish and to release as news mid next year. So this is the plan, but I can already tell you that we see considerable and competitive weight loss rates.
That is really interesting. But it shows that people with obesity, people with diabetes, it's not that they're incapable of producing these hormones. It's just that a signal's getting lost on the way to telling the body it's time.
Absolutely, for different reasons. And for me, and this is why I mentioned this, thanks again for pointing this out, we were very anxious to learn, very massively interested, scientifically interested in the very simple question: do patients who are obese but healthy react similarly to those who are obese and unhealthy because they have a type 2 diabetes at the side or whatever? And they all do react similarly. And that is, no one has ever been able to do what we do, to kind of stimulate those cells as we do it. And this is why we're now collecting new knowledge. We can do things, we do things and measure parameters that have never been measured before. And so this is why I'm very excited about it. My other hat that I'm wearing is being a professor at the University of Toronto, Canada, where I'm at the Department of Physiology. And physiology is about function, the function of life. And pathophysiology is the science about what happens if this gets derailed. And now we have the chance to actually understand what the derailment is in obesity and metabolic disease, and how we can get it back on track. And it seems to work.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So you're here for the obesity conference, which is sort of co-located with LSX.
Correct.
When did you get in?
I got in yesterday.
So have you heard anything interesting so far today?
The day today, the obesity part of the conference here was packed with interesting talks. The day started with a panel which actually talked about what's beyond GLP-1 and what are GLP-1 and other triplet dual agonists, and what are the current problems. And there was a leader from a large pharmaceutical company who was remarkably open about the problems. He actually made the point that I tried to make tomorrow in my talk, where I thought, well, I need to prepare the ground, and said, hey, it's not isn't as good as advertised, because we have massive problems with all this. We have this benefit. We have learned that we can lose weight. We can lose massive amount of weight, which is new. I mean, if you think about all the maneuvers that have been made over the last decades in order to lose weight, they were all unsuccessful. And all of a sudden, we have GLP-1 agonists who induce this massive weight loss. This is magnificent. This is wonderful. But when you look at this as a hype, we're now in the phase where we understand, okay, where there's light, there's shadow. And what we see now is weight loss rates in a real-world scenario are not as high as advertised, not as high as in controlled trials. But we also continue to see this massive amounts of side effects and high dropout rates. In those near real-world scenario trials that we're getting in right now, what you see is that up to 50 to 60% of patients don't finish the trial, which is a catastrophe, because if they lose weight and then get off the drug, they have this massive rebound and they're back to where they were. Even worse, because through this massive weight loss, they might have lost muscle mass, which is disproportionately replaced when they gain weight again by fat. So we're seeing sequels here of a treatment which are not desirable. So we need to better understand what's going on. We need to better deal with. We need to find better ways to treat obesity, and that is what came then in the talks. Lots of new principles, lots of new data. There were groups which had better or now small molecules, not GLP-1 agonists, but small molecules which were developed with generative AI to really very precisely dock to a certain part of the GLP-1 receptor, and they had less side effects. They induced considerable weight loss. Very exciting. So if you can, we're kind of lining up a portfolio of things that we can now combine at some point in time. It's very fascinating. I think it's a huge progress that's happening right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think the pace of innovation in this space is pretty dizzying, especially compared to 3 years ago or something, where
Yes.
there was just no innovation happening at all.
No, because there was no money. I mean, this is a very good friend of mine has just heard the phrase from him, money is the answer, what was the question, right? So this is what's happening right now. It's a massive amount of money coming into the field. Lots of collaborations between big pharma and small biotechs. And small biotechs are much more easy to maneuver. They're much faster. They're driven by far more efficient structures than big pharma, and big pharma knows this. This is why they look at the small biotechs, they look at partnerships and acquiring schemes afterwards. And this is happening right now in this particular field. There are other fields that I also touch on and that I'm involved in where everything's much slower because there's less money. This obesity now is the big hype, it's the big thing. And we better use the time when the hype still goes on to really do the best science we can to kind of use the time and the money we have right now in the best way possible.
I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you very much. It was good seeing you again.
And good luck with your talk.